when I was area director for neighborhood legal services for 5 years. After 4 years, Nixon ordered me fired.
As in President Nixon?
Yeah, President Nixon.
Okay.
He didn't put me on a list. He ordered me fired. And I said, fuck you. I'd learned to say things like that in the community at that time.
Did you say that?
We had a great organized community. And the fun thing was, when they said they wanted to fire me, well, the reason they wanted to fire me, let me tell you. First of all, I wrote articles and said that the poverty program is a shuck and a jive because they give us enough money to handle 5% of the cases that qualify for us and need us. And I didn't mind saying it. And then very quickly, I started using the office in a way that it should be used. One of the first things that happened, well, first I worked for about 6 months or 7 months in East LA. And while I'm there, having been an attorney for 5 years at the bank, and by the way, they hired me, even though I wasn't a member of California's bar, and they gave me as part of my duties, that I should read all of the daily journal and all the new cases, because they knew I hadn't been in law school for over 5 or 6 years. And the man who hired me was the secretary of the bank, head of the real estate department, head of their law division. And I had come to California. I didn't want to be a lawyer. I wanted to do something exciting. Maybe write a screenplay, write a novel, all those sorts of things. And no one would hire me because they thought all I wanted to do was pass this, take and pass the California bar. So I worked for 4 months at
Unit Bank.
Juvenile. No. I was 5.
Unit?
Yeah. When I left the bank.
Which bank was it?
Union Bank.
Union Bank?
Yeah. Most unusual bank. That's why Sam hired me, because he'd been looking for somebody who was well qualified and who had the personality, because Union Bank was a most unusual bank. Anyway, as soon as he hired me, the board of directors gave all of the men corporate titles and refused to give me one. And so what happened was, every couple of months, I would scream and yell and pound my feet and demand my title. And since the board didn't have to give me a raise, my boss, who wanted to keep me for good reason, had gone ahead and he would give me a raise in pay. So by the time I'd been there for 5 years, I was making almost as much money as any of the others. But the board, so anyway, that's how I got to go to the United States Supreme Court twice. That was the first time the United States Supreme Court ruled on me. I called EEOC and said that I wanted to know where do I file a complaint for discrimination. And the woman on the other end said to me, well, is it race, religion, color, or creed? And I said, it's none of those things. Now, this was FEPC. This wasn't EEOC. I went to EEOC later. This was FEPC.
Your Department of Fair Employment and Housing.
Yeah, right. And they said, oh, honey, we don't have no sex in this office. And I said, gee, I feel sorry for you guys. I mean, after all, you're adults. So then I went to EEOC, and the Justice Department wound up representing me, and we went up to the United States Supreme Court twice. Made very good law, but unfortunately, the justice attorneys were all male, white males, of course, and they didn't think it worthwhile to talk to me. But the investigator was a black attorney who had been appointed as one of the attorneys to desegregate the United States Army in Mississippi. And he and I got along beautifully. And
What year was that?
What year was that? It was 5 years after 61, 62. It was about 67.
67.
But I got to go back and look again because I don't have. It's there.
It was before King
It's
was
Buckley.
killed, right?
Yeah, it's Buckley versus Union Bank.
I love that.
And basically, what that established is the reason why, if you go to EEOC or your local state, civil rights entity, like in this state, it's Department of Fair Employment and Housing, they have to now cross-file with the other agency.
Yeah.
To make sure that all of your remedies are being exhausted in one felt swoop.
But
So wait, but what's the benefit of that? That minimizes legwork for the
It minimizes
plaintiff, or-
duplication. So, see, the thing is, people would would file a DFEH and sue, and then the other side would argue, oh, well, you haven't exhausted your federal remedies. Where you go to EEOC, and then they'd argue, well, you didn't exhaust your state remedies.
Yeah.
So now, because of her case, everyone has to cross-file.
Yeah. When
When you go into DFEH, they file it with the EEOC. If you go into EEOC, they file it with DFEH.
But the
That's
more
crazy.
important decision was the first case.
Yeah.
The first case gave the EEOC the right to get all of the records of the corporation, regardless, because they tried to say, oh, no, wait a minute, you can't see. I mean, this is private to all the rest of the employees. You don't have a right to take a look at all of the, records. And the United States Supreme Court, at that point, being a fairly decent court, as opposed to the fascist institute it is now, they went ahead and they said, we can go ahead and we can get all the records. You can have all the records to determine whether or not you are in one way or another treating men better than women. And so that was the number one. And then number two was where, by this time, the other thing I had done to irritate them, I did a lot of things they liked. For instance, we had the Uniform Commercial Code came into effect in California while I was working there the first year or two. And what happened was none of the other attorneys could do anything about that. We had 7 offices, we had lots of things, but nobody could really handle it. I went ahead and I changed all the documents to fit the Uniform Commercial Code. I put in some boilerplate, but I told my boss, I said, you listen, I'm putting in some of this boilerplate, but you ever try to use it, and I'm going to be the first one that goes to the feds and report to you.
Oh, shit.
And so they said, okay, we know. And in fact, in later years, when I was running for, was it the
Attorney General.
Attorney General? Yeah, was that where I had the joint fundraiser with the Berrigan brothers? Or
Yeah,
was that?
that was
Yeah,
1970,
yeah, that was that. Anyways, in that we were having this.
Oh, no. With the Berrigan Brothers, that was 72. That was when you ran for DA.
Yeah, for DA,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
You ran for DA?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, where at?
LA County.
LA
She was
County?
the first woman to run for California Attorney General in
What?
1970. And the first woman to run for LA County District Attorney in
Oh,
1972.
man.
And when she ran in 72, they arrested her,
What?
and she did time in Civil Brand Institute.
No way.
Some great times there.
Yeah.
Had
She-
I never heard anybody say that about
Right about civil brand.
Civil brand. Oh, man.
Oh, I gotta tell you, that's a great story.
It's
bet that
unbelievable.
is.
Civil brand?
Tell that story.
Civil brand.
What?
Tell us the
Yeah,
civil
tell the
brand.
civil brand.
Okay, what happened was that, what happened was
This is unbelievable
that
stuff.
I had, it was when I was area director, we worked with a whole bunch of things, including we had anti-war demonstrations, which Nixon got very mad at because my offices were all open for 24 hours for a whole week while LAPD had our Venice occupied. And I had volunteers manning the phones all day and night. We went and we got evidence for the public defender so that they could defend the people who were being arrested. The cops were doing all these, their idiotic things. And one funny one was very, I think, showed the kind of relationship we had with some of the police.
Uh-oh.
There are some good police.
There are?
Yeah, I was engaged to one of them.
Oh,
Anyway,
wow.
Didn't marry him, but
Oh.
but the thing was, we had an arrest taking place, and we trained our volunteers. You had to stay 15 feet away, couldn't, otherwise you're interfering. And then when they're arrested, you'd call and you'd give them our number, and they should call as soon as they're in jail so we know they're there and we can get some help out to them. So this guy was being arrested on the post office steps. And he's struggling and struggling. And the volunteer said, call Neighbor Legal Services, and gives a number. And the guy said, he's still struggling. He said, what? And so they shout the number again. And he said, I can't hear you. What? And the cop stops him after 3 times, and he said, listen, when I get you to the jail, I'll give you the number. Don't worry.
That's funny.
And then, of course, then I laid down on the sidewalk in a die-in in front of Nixon's headquarters in L.A.
You did a die-in?
I did a die-in, yeah.
Oh, wow. In front of Nixon's headquarters.
Wait,
In
what's
front of
the diet?
Nixon's headquarters, yes.
I didn't get in person.
Laid there as though they were dead
Nixon.
to protest
I
the
did
mining of
I
Haiphong
went to a school
Harbor
that he went to.
during the Vietnam War.
Yeah. So anyway, and the thing was that there were 20 of us, professionals, who laid down on the sidewalk. And there were other, but I won't tell you about it now. But anyway, but the thing is that they shook our hands, the police shook our hands and said, oh, you did a very nice die-in. We worked it out beforehand. And then we go home, and 10 days later we get a notice to come in and be tried. Nixon was very upset that I was there, especially.
What?
And
Nixon really had it in for the Peace and Freedom Party because in 1970, and he says this in his memoirs, in 1970, in San Jose, we had 3,000 demonstrators out there in front of the San Jose Civic Auditorium. It was a demonstration led by Gail Justice, who was an old friend of ours. He later ran for U.S. Senate on our ticket.
is he still around?
No, he died. But anyway,
Bad habit of doing that.
anyway.
What's that?
Anyway,
Nixon
Nixon.
people have got a bad habit of doing that around. I
Yeah.
don't believe in dying.
So
What?
Nixon says in his memoirs, he quotes Gail as saying, "We called this demonstration to show Richard Nixon that he is not welcome in the state of California because he is a war criminal."
Yep.
And he claimed that this was the only time that because of the California Peace and Freedom Party, he said this is the only time in the history of the United States where an incumbent president had his life threatened with mob violence.
Wow.
Now, another one of our friends who was there, Maureen Smith, she says, "Oh, we were throwing some rotten eggs and tomatoes and shit, but that's the only threat to his fucking life, rotten eggs and tomatoes, But anyway, because he was so pissed off about that, he then
The president.
he flew from San Jose to Maricopa County Airport in Phoenix, okay? And on the airport tarmac, he gave this impromptu speech, which there was all this aircraft noise in the background and shit. It was really horrible tape, It was taped by the local TV crews. And Nixon was like in a state of mania,
Oh my
at
gosh.
this point. And he thought that was the best speech he had ever given in his life. Well, John Mitchell, who was then Attorney General, would later say of this speech that it sounded more like Nixon was running for district attorney of Maricopa County rather than president of the United States. And all three, ABC, NBC, and CBS, all told the committee to reelect the president of the Republican National Committee that this tape did not meet minimal broadcast standards. It was that bad. Nixon refused to look at the tape. He thought that the press was conspiring against him because he was in such a tizzy because of what we had done to him in San Jose. So he insisted that the Republican National Committee buy 15 minutes of TV time to show that tape on TV.
Did they?
Yes, they did. The Democrats bought 15 minutes time, and Ed Muskie, in a controlled setting in front of a fireplace, gave a Democratic response, to Nixon's speech, a reasonable position on law and order. And as a result of Nixon's speech, the Republicans got their ass kicked in those midterm elections because of that. But he, in his memoirs, he attributes that to us, the California Peace and Freedom Party. So he really had it in for us, and that's why, he found out Marge was involved. Marge, the Peace and Freedom candidate for district attorney now. Oh, he wanted her jailed.
Yeah, and Jen, can you just kind of recapitulate exactly who is Marge?
Well, Marge became a lawyer when I was 3 years old.
And what's your last name?
I'm Jan Tucker.
Uh-huh.
Marge became a lawyer in 1958 when I was only 3 years old. And, was the first woman to run for California Attorney General, first woman to run for LA County DA. Was the
first woman to argue.
First woman to argue before the U.S. Supreme Court in a pantsuit.
In a pantsuit.
First woman to appear before the Supreme Court and get sworn in a miniskirt. Was the first woman bank lawyer in the United States. In 1964, she was in Mississippi facing down the Ku Klux Klan and the White Citizens Council.
The Ku Klux Klan?
Yeah.
What?
Facing them down in Freedom Summer.
All right.
And in 1973, she was inside Wounded Knee with the American Indian Movement, while all the famous left lawyers like Leonard Bodine and William Kunstler were outside holding press conferences. She was inside being shot at, along with the American Indian Movement in Wounded Knee, by the U.S. government, by the FBI and the Army.
What?
Yeah.
They were shooting. They didn't shoot at me. No. But the other thing you didn't know is one of the other reasons Nixon, I think, was upset with me was because Rick and I married the my director of my advisory board. He was
I should grab my notebook.
He was an architect, an activist. And we went to the when Nixon and Watergate was happening, we went to Florida, because Rick was from Florida, and he had been part of the the artistic community. And so what happened was there were seven women had gone ahead and they had decided to do a demonstration, and so they invited me along to do it. And what we did was we took a bunch of baby dolls, and we napalmed them. And then what we did was we made our faces all white.
What do you mean you napalmed them, the baby dolls?
Well, what we did was we destroyed their body and made them all full of damages. We made them look like,
As though they'd been burnt by napalm in Vietnam.
Oh, Vietnam. Okay, that was the thing. Okay,
yeah,
Vietnam.
And this was
This was the Vietnam Age then?
Yeah, and this was when the first fairly large black community was supporting Nixon. And but we did this demonstration. What we did, there were 7 of us, and we put these hats on, and our faces were, and we didn't say a word. And what we did was we stood outside the Watergate Hotel. And as these cars came in, all these big limousines and things, we just held our damaged babies to them. And the reporters wanted us to talk. We wouldn't say a word. We wouldn't tell them who we were. We wouldn't tell them what we were doing. We just showed them the napalmed baby dolls. Mm. And we scared the hell out of a lot of people. They'd quick roll up their windows.
That's some sight.
Anyway.
Go back and look at video. That's before my time. My father was a